If you don't mind, I'm going to start the recording. Well, hello and welcome, everyone. Thank you for coming to our webinar, Deep Dive into Updates on Minnesota Employment Laws. I want to introduce Ashley Drews. She works with PRO. Ashley is a Human Resources Director and has 8 years of experience in human resources and a Bachelor of Science degree in management and minor in marketing from the University of Minnesota. Prior to joining PRO, she worked in insurance and workers' compensation, bringing a broad knowledge base in many areas of human resources. Furthering her knowledge in the human resources field, Ashley's earned her SHRM Society of Human Resources Management Certified Professional Certification, as well as a mental health first aid responder. Ashley is responsible for managing clients and employee relations through the various situations, ensuring compliance with state and federal laws, managing client human resources initiatives, policy and procedure creation, and employee handbook updates. Her passion is working with and establishing relationships with our clients and their employees. Production Workforce Professionals was created with the goal of easing the employee administration burdens of business owners and in the manufacturing industry. With our PRO team on the ground and HRIS system in the cloud, you get the best of both worlds when it comes to human resource management. Thank you, Ashley, for joining us, and I'll let you take over.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Rachel. And thank you, Midwest Minnesota Manufacturers Association. I'm thankful to have for you to have me back again. And I'm really sorry that I can't get my camera working, but I'm actually really bummed. I even wore my Minnesota necklace just for you guys today, but it's all good. I'm here and I'm happy to be here. So just a quick agenda. We're going to go through the Minnesota Earn Sick and Safe Time, recreational marijuana, Minnesota pregnancy and parental leave law expansion, historical pay ban, the Crown Act, and the non-compete ban. So we'll do a deep dive into Earn Sick and Safe Time, recreational marijuana, and the Minnesota pregnancy and parental leave. And then I have a few touch points on the other three. And at any point, feel free to drop a question in the chat. We can keep this pretty informal. I will ask for questions at the end as well. So the Minnesota Earn Sick and Safe Time beginning January 1 of 2024. Thank you. Someone just told me that they're seeing my notes. So I just want to, okay, there we go. Let me know if that's better.
That's great.
Thank you. Thank you, guys. Okay, so Minnesota Earn Sick and Safe Time beginning January 1 of 2024. The entire state of Minnesota will join the ranks of 16 other states with paid leave laws. Something to note here is that if you have employees working in Minneapolis, St. Paul, Bloomington, or Duluth, those cities already have paid leave laws. So if you have employees working in those cities, you will want to take a look at those laws and make sure that what you're providing is the highest level of leave laws for those employees, or the most beneficial, and build your policy around that. Another thing to note there, I've had this question a ton. Is there a small business exception? There is not. This is applicable for any employer with one employee or more. So it affects all employees, full-time, part-time, temporary, on-call, you name it. So employees earn 1 hour for every 30 hours worked. So 1 hour of earned sick and safe time for every 30 hours worked, up to a maximum of 48 hours with a rollover of 80 hours. So if an employee, goes through this next year and does not use any of their earned sick and safe time, they will be able to roll over 48 hours. Okay. Employees are eligible for this after working for a company working in Minnesota for 80 hours. So if someone is working in Minnesota for 80 hours, they are eligible. So I had a question pop up. Is this in addition to what employers already offer for accrued vacation time? I am planning to get to that. So I will, I'll just, I think it's on my next slide actually. So hang tight with me, okay? So in addition to that paid time off that you're currently already offering, you don't have to also offer earned sick and safe time. You can modify your policy to make it compliant with the regulations of earned sick and safe time. So what that means is you'll want to take a look at what you're currently offering for any paid time off policy and make sure that it's applicable for full-time and part-time employees and temporary, on-call, seasonal, etc. You'll want to make sure that they have the availability to receive that earned sick and safe time or PTO after working for the company for 80 hours or upon hire. And then you'll want to make sure that they receive at least 1 hour for every 30 hours worked or the equivalent.
There is a question in the chat, and they're asking, is this in addition to what employers already offer for accrued vacation time?
Yeah, so you can look at your policy and see if what your policy states is at least as generous as what the law requires. So what that means is you'll want to take a look at your existing PTO vacation sick time policy, and you can modify it. It doesn't have to be in addition to, but it will need to be at least as generous as what the law requires. So meaning it'll need to be available for both full and part-time, temporary employees, seasonal. It'll need to be at least 1 hour for every 30 hours worked. And employees will need to be able to accrue that time after working for 80 hours, or essentially right away. All right. So again, you can modify that existing PTO sick vacation time policy if you choose, but you'll want to make sure that it does meet the requirements of the law. Okay. So coming back to the slide, front loading versus accrual. So the law requires 1 hour for every 30 hours worked. However, it does provide provisions if a company does want to front load that time. So you can front load 48 hours because that's the maximum. But the law states that if you front load 48, you have to pay it whatever is unused out at the end of the year. If you front load 80, you do not have to pay out anything at the end of the year. So this also brings up a good thing to note, that if an employee terminates either voluntarily or involuntarily, meaning, it was your choice or theirs, unused earned sick and safe time does not need to be paid out to the employee. So calendar year.
Another question, do we have to call it ESST?
You do not. So you do not have to call it ESST in order for it to be compliant. It just has to comply with what the law requires. So on calendar year versus anniversary year accrual, according to the law, a company can decide if the time accrues based on anniversary or calendar year. However, you'll want to keep in mind that this law begins on January 1. So at least initially for your existing employees, the accrual will need to begin on calendar year. If you choose to, not modify your PTO policy, and as long as you don't have anyone new starting. And then another thing to note is for returning employees, sometimes employees come and go, sometimes they're seasonal, that kind of thing. If an employee returns to the company within 180 days of separation, they are entitled to any earned sick and safe time hours that they accrued prior to leaving. So remember how I said that you don't have to pay it out, but you may want to keep track of how many hours departing employees have if you are considering having them back in the future.
There's another question here. How do you track that if it is in one bucket to determine if you pay out vacation upon the working relationship?
Yeah, good question. So that's really up to the company. If they, the law states that you don't have to separate them, but you don't have to pay out earned sick and safe time. And most employers pay out paid time off if, the departing employee leaves on good terms and fulfills the requirements and et cetera, works their 2-week notice. So if you do have a policy like that, you may want to separate them so that it's clear what is paid out and what isn't. So who pays for all this? Well, the employer pays 100% of the cost of the earned sick and safe time for the employee. The fine for non-compliance of this is $10,000 per instance. So another thing to note that I forgot to is that the employees' earned sick and safe time must be paid out at their regular rate of pay, exactly like PTO would be, or holiday pay, that kind of thing. So the reasons employees can use earned sick and safe time is mental or physical illness, medical provider appointments for themselves or family members, care of a family member, school closure, weather-related closure, or if they're a victim of domestic abuse or violence, which is where the safe time part of the law comes in. So these laws all apply to the employee and any typical family member that you would expect. But in addition, the law also cites up to one individual annually that the employee can designate as someone that they need to provide care for. So if your mechanic's brother's uncle needs care and you're able to help him, well, you can tell your employer, I need to provide help to them. Kind of a strange provision based on other states' paid leave laws, which is why I wanted to make sure to mention it. So other utilization requirements, after 3 days of absence, employers can request reasonable supporting documentation for the employee's leave. So if an employee needs to be gone for 3 days, you can request documentation from, a medical provider or, whatever entity that they may need help from. Employees cannot be required to find another person or employee to work their shift. So if someone calls in and says, I need to be off today, I'm sick, you can't require them to find another employee to work. The employee's job must also be held while they're using their earned sick and safe time. And employees can't be discriminated against for using their earned sick and safe time.
Employees that start January 1st, after 6 months of employment, they start accruing 3 hours of vacation time 2 weeks a year. How would this work best with ESST?
I'm not sure I understand the question. So are they looking at modifying their policy?
It's a question here, and then I'm sorry. There was a piece of the question I didn't see before. Employees that start January 1st. After 6 months of employment, they start accruing 3.08 hours of vacation time, 2 weeks per year. How would this work with ESST?
Got it. Okay, thank you. Yep, they'd have to modify their existing vacation time policy to be eligible after 80 hours of working. And then they'd also have to make sure that the employee accrues at least 48 hours during that first year. Okay. Some other employer requirements, employers are required to list an employee's available balance of their earned sick and safe time or their PTO vacation time, however they label it. They're required to list their available hours on their employees' pay stubs. It's also required to provide a notice to the employees at the beginning of their employment about ESST. And they're also required to provide notice of ESST in the employee handbook if the company has one, which they should. Okay. Any further questions on earn sick and safe time before I move on? Okay, and we can always come back to.
Sure, and you don't have, if you'd like to write them in the chat, I'd be happy to facilitate those questions for you, or please feel free to unmute yourself and ask during the presentation.
Absolutely, thank you, Rachel. All right, so, and we'll have time for questions at the end too. So if, if something comes to mind as we're talking, feel free to, ask it at that time too. So at this point, we'll move on to the legalization of recreational marijuana. The legal specifics are the law amends the existing drug and alcohol testing statutes in the following ways. So the definition of drug specifically is changed to exclude marijuana and marijuana products. The definition of drug and alcohol testing no longer includes cannabis. So an action step here would be you're going to want to review your drug and alcohol testing policies if you haven't already. And if your policy refers to drugs only, you'll want to make sure to also add in, marijuana and marijuana products, and specifically cite the prohibition of marijuana and marijuana products, regardless of prescription, within your policy. Employers can still require employees to submit to random cannabis testing if they're in a safety sensitive position, or if they, are federally regulated, and in a few other certain situations. All right, so this was effective August 1. Minnesota was the 23rd state. So, thankfully we have some other states that have come before us to kind of know the path here, but employees are still not allowed to possess, use, or be under the influence of marijuana or cannabis products while at work or on a job site, as long as your policy says so. So Minnesotans are legally allowed to possess and use marijuana recreationally without a prescription. So this law verifies that various forms of cannabis are now considered a lawful consumable product, quote unquote, which employees cannot be discriminated against for using off-duty in a lawful manner. So if your policy says illegal drugs, again, you're going to want to update that to include marijuana or cannabis and cannabis products. Keep in mind, Delta 8 and Delta 9, they're also derivatives of marijuana, which were legalized last year. So, make sure to include those as well. They do have psychoactive effects in addition to cannabis or marijuana. So employers can still test for cannabis in certain situations, reasonable suspicion being one of them. So if you suspect that an employee is under the influence of cannabis or marijuana while at work, and they have violated a written rule that you have or a written policy, you are able to bring them in for testing. So testing for cannabis, again, will be allowed in these certain situations. Keep in mind, the definition of safety sensitive is very broad. So it's, by OSHA definition, is a job including a supervisory or management position in which an impairment caused by drug or alcohol usage would threaten the health or safety of any person. So pretty broad definition, but if you feel that you have safety sensitive positions, I would just make sure that your policy says so and which positions those are. Okay, so Minnesota Parenting and Parental Leave and Nursing Mothers Law expansion. So this law was in effect, but as of July 1, there were some additional items added to the law. So this used to apply to employers with 15 or more employees. It's now 1. So any employer with 1 or more employees. Employers must inform employees about their pregnancy and accommodation rights upon hire or when asked. And they must also include a notice in the employee handbook. So part of this is that employers are required to provide reasonable break time, longer break time if needed for food, rest. There's no limits on seating. So if an employee says they need to be seated, an employer is not required to have them obtain a doctor's note for that kind of thing, or for lifting over 20 pounds. New to this law is temporary leaves of absence. So if an employee needs to, be gone for a temporary amount of time due to a pregnancy or parental leave situation, they, have to be allowed to do that. Oh, I have a typo there, my apologies. They can also, have a modification in their work schedule or job assignment, or take frequent or longer break times. So employees must also be placed back in a comparable position with similar duties, number of hours, and pay. All right, so just a few items on, oops, excuse me, I apologize. So the historical pay ban, this begins January 1, 2024. Employers will be prohibited from inquiring about employees or prospective employees' past wages. So you'll want to take a look at your application, and if it says anything or requests information regarding how much an employee made in a previous position, you're going to have to take that out effective January 1. This does not prevent the applicant from voluntarily disclosing that information. It also does not prevent, a discussion with the employee about their salary expectations or requesting their salary expectations in your application. And that was January 1 again, just the Crown Act, this is the acronym here is Create a Respectful and Open World for Natural Hair. So basically, employees cannot be discriminated against because of their natural hair texture or hairstyle. So this includes braids, locks, twists, dreadlocks, that kind of thing. So this applies to employers and places of accommodation. The ban on non-compete agreements, this was effective July 1. Companies can
I have another question here from Rose, who says, do we need to provide this notice to temp workers?
Rose, which notice are you referring to?
The mother one, the lactating mother one.
Yeah.
Only because I have like some that are employed through temp services and they're not technically our employees just yet. So I didn't know if I should hand that to them when they first start here, or if I should give it to them the day that they're actually employed with us.
Got it. Got it. Thank you for clarifying. You'll want to give it to them when they officially start working for your company. When they're employed by the staffing company, it is the staffing company's responsibility to provide notice to them.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
You bet. Yep. So the ban on non-compete agreements, this was effective July 1. Companies can no longer utilize non-competition agreements. This is for any employee. It doesn't matter what wage they're at or what position within the company. It, however, does not ban non-solicitation agreements, non-disclosure agreements, or confidentiality agreements. So you can still use those. And this is
going.
Go ahead.
Sorry, going back to the hair one. Does the Crown Act pertain to non-traditional brightly dyed hair?
It does not. That is not natural hair. So if you want to have a policy against unnatural hair colors, you absolutely can. All right, so those non-solicitation, non-disclosure, and confidentiality agreements are permissible. So you'll want to take a look. If you do use these types of agreements, you'll just want to take a look at them and make sure that there is no provision in there stating that, there's a non-competition between, us and a business in a competing industry in a certain geographical area for X amount of time. Those types of wording and those types of things are not going to be permissible. You can, however, hold your confidentiality and state non-disclosure and non-solicitation. Those are all permissible. This bill is also not retroactive. So if you have an employee who started 3 years ago and you had him sign a non-compete at that time, that is still in effect.
Ashley, what about pay found when doing background checks?
Okay, so we didn't ask the employee what their pay was. If we happen to find that information, you know, it's not in violation of the law that I'm aware of. So if you know, we didn't ask the employee what it was, they were not required to disclose it. So based on my knowledge, I think that would be fine. Granted, I'm not an employment attorney.
There's another question that goes back to the safety sensitive position. And has there been any further clarification been made upon what is a safety sensitive position?
There has not. That still goes back to the OSHA definition of a job including supervisory or management position in which an impairment caused by drug or alcohol usage would threaten the health or safety of any person. So OSHA has not wavered on that definition. It still stands. There's not been any case law on this, believe it or not, which blows my mind. So that's what we have to go on at this time. All right. So how we help is we've been helping all of our clients kind of decipher these new laws. I have a chart here of all of the laws that have taken place this year and some that are upcoming here. So Minnesota's been doing a lot of moving and shaking, and it's, you know, it's a lot to digest, especially when you're running around trying to do your day-to-day. So that's what we're here for. I eat, live, and breathe HR. I love it for some reason. No, I'm kidding. But we've been helping our clients decipher what these laws are and what they mean and how they apply them to their business. We've been updating handbooks, and then we have our HRIS system to track the policies as well. So that's another thing that I've been spending a lot of my days on, is helping our clients take a look at their PTO policy and what that means and how it fits into the earned sick and safe time requirements. All right. I think we have some time for formal questions as well.
Now that's a lot of information. Here's your chance to ask questions for Ashley. And there's oh, I see Steve Lean chimed in. What if an employee lives in Wisconsin most of the time, but occasionally works in Minnesota?
Yep, so if they work in Minnesota, keep in mind this is work in Minnesota for 80 hours or more during the year, they would be eligible for earned sick and safe time.
Can you explain the front load on ESST again?
Yeah, you bet. So the front load, I know it's kind of confusing. So what that means is if a company chooses to front load 48 hours, which is what's required by law for the employee to receive in a year. So if a company chooses to front load 48, they have to pay out, by law, this is required, they have to pay out whatever is unused at the end of the year. If they choose to front load 80 hours, they do not have to pay it out. So a lot of policies I see are there, I would call them lump sum policies. So essentially you're providing your employees a lump sum of 48 hours at the beginning of the year. If you choose to do that, just know that you'd have to pay out whatever they don't use. If you choose to front load 80 hours or provide that lump sum of 80 hours at the beginning of the year, you don't then have to pay it out. Please let me know if that does not answer your question. I'm happy to try to explain it a different way.
And we will be providing these slides on our website when this is over. And I believe we get them emailed out to everyone. There's another question here. What about Minnesota-based employer? If a Minnesota-based employer hires employees to work in various states throughout a duration of the season, i.e. seasonal or field employees?
Yep. So if you're a Minnesota-based company and you hire employees to work in other states, you would not be required to provide the earned sick and safe time other than to your Minnesota employees. However, there's a lot of states that have paid leave laws. So you'll want to take a look at what states you're having employees work in and what other laws may be applicable for them in those other states.
How does the sick leave impact hybrid remote employees? If an employee works in another state but comes to the office once a week in Minnesota, their hours only matter when they're in Minnesota. Is that correct?
That is correct. Yep.
I do have another one here, but I'm not quite sure what it refers to. So is it the 48 hours per year only? Let me go back a little.
So the requirement for earned sick and safe time is a maximum of 48 hours. Keep in mind, if an employee, does not work very much, they're not going to hit that 40 hours. So it's 1 hour for every 30 hours worked, up to a maximum of 48, and then a rollover requirement of 80 hours.
Okay, so when I asked that question, it was because you stated if you front loaded 80. So when you were talking the front loading the 80 hours, were you speaking about if that was included in their vacation and all that, all those hours? Then it wouldn't have to be paid out at the end of the year if they didn't use it?
Got it. Not necessarily. So the requirement of the law is that if you front load, this is earned sick and safe time specific. So if you front load 80 hours of earned sick and safe time specifically, you don't have to pay that out. If you have a PTO policy that you want to modify to kind of meld with earned sick and safe time, you'll want to make sure to take a look at that and make sure that you allow a rollover of 80 hours.
Okay, so now I'm sorry. I'm not getting this because if it's only 48 hours per year
Yep.
of earned sick and safe time, why would you front load them 80 hours?
You don't have to. So if you front load 48, you just then have to pay out whatever they don't use at the end of the year.
Okay, I gotcha.
But the law states that if you front load 80, then you don't have to pay anything out.
Okay, thank you.
And there's another question here for further clarification of the out-of-state seasonal work. ESST is based on where the job or work is performed and not where the employee is living or where the business is based.
Correct. So if work is performed in a different state, it's not applicable for earned sick and safe time. This is only applicable for hours that are worked in Minnesota by employees. So it doesn't matter if a company is in Wisconsin or in North Dakota. If an employee works in Minnesota, that's the only thing that the law is concerned with.
There's another question. We have truck drivers that are not paid by the hour. How do we figure their ESST when they are driving across the country?
Yeah, that's a really great question. And it's one I've gotten a fair amount. And unfortunately, I don't have a good answer because the Minnesota has stated that they will publish a frequently asked questions. And they have. However, the frequently asked questions do not cover truck drivers or commission-based employees. So at this moment, I don't have any further clarification on that. The only thing that I can decipher based on what I know and what I've read is that the law isn't necessarily concerned with those employees at this time.
To clarify, if you offer an ESST carryover of 48 hours, do you need to pay it out?
Yeah, no. So, well, you'd have to roll it out. You'd have to allow rollover up to 80 hours. And you don't have to pay that out. We're talking specifically on paying out if you front load. So if a company provides a lump sum of 48 hours for the year. So for an example, an employee starts on January 1, they've now worked 80 hours for the company and they're given a lump sum of 48 hours. Say they use 40 hours of that throughout the course of the year. The company would have to pay out that 8 hours that they don't use. The law requires that so that's only specific to lump sum policies. If you have an accrual-based policy, so if you have a policy set up where your employees earn 1 hour of earned sick and safe time for every 30 hours worked, and they hit that maximum of 48, and say, we'll have that same example, say they've used 40 hours and they still have 8 hours. You can roll over that 8 hours into the next year up to a maximum of 80. So the difference here is a front load policy or a lump sum policy versus an accrual based policy. So front load or accrual based are different. So front load or lump sum would be, I'm providing this big bucket of ESST time. And accrual based would be, I'm accruing time as I work.
Okay, then there's a good question here. What is the reason anyone would want to front load this versus letting it accrue?
That is a great question. I have no idea. I'm just telling you what the law says.
For ESST, an employer cannot require discrimination unless the time is missed, wait, sorry, it's blocking on my computer. The time missed is 3 or more days.
No, so you can ask for documentation after 3 days. But if an employee has all 48 hours to use, they're going to be gone for 6 days. You can't discriminate against them for those entire 6 days.
And is that 3 consecutive days? Correct?
That is consecutive days, yes.
Do you know if we can prorate if we plan a January front load with a payout in December? Like if someone starts July, can we give 24 hours and pay out in December?
I don't see why you couldn't, as long as the hours meet the requirements. Yeah, I don't see why that would be an issue. Good question.
Does the Crown Act need to be added to the handbook? And is this already in effect?
It is already in effect. It was July 1, and yes, it does need to be added to your handbook.
Any other questions? We got a couple of thank yous. So unless we have any more questions, we're going to wrap up and we will be sending out these slides to everyone. Another question here, to clarify, an employee can call in every Monday for 6 weeks and not have to require documentation?
That is accurate. As long as they have a legitimate reason to use the earned sick and safe time.
Rachel, I just want to give a shout out to Raleigh with Hibbing Fabrication. He's the one
Just
that
left, but yes, you should still give him a shout out because we're recording this and he might watch it.
Yeah, so we were at a networking event and he came up to me and started asking me all these questions. And I said, well, really, we should talk with Ashley. And then he said, I think a lot of manufacturers are having these questions. And so it was his idea to set up this topic for the workforce webinar. And I'm excited to see so many people participating. So
yeah, me too.
Yeah, me too.
Mandy just stated that that is why I think we will prorate to incentivize people coming to work and not taking advantage of ESST.
Yep.
And then Hannah asks, can we still use the attendance policy in regard to calling in? Just have to pay them, correct? Oh, that's a good one.
Yes. Yep, that's correct.
week example where the employee was off 6 Mondays in a row, can we ask why they are absent without asking for documentation?
You can, yeah. So it's actually, part of the requirement in order to meet earned sick and safe time standards is the reason that the employee is off has to be a qualifying reason. So, you can ask the employee why they are taking that time off. And as long as it meets the requirements of, the reasons for earned sick and safe time, then it's fine. But if it doesn't, it can't and shouldn't be classified as earned sick and safe time.
Well, actually, you sure are a wealth of knowledge. So many questions about all these new rules and laws.
Thank you. Yeah, and if anyone thinks of anything afterwards, feel free to email Allison or I, and we can certainly get you an answer and help you in that regard too. So we'll make sure to get the slides out as well.
Do employees earn ESST for normal PTO?
So this would be a situation where you'd want to take a look at your PTO policy. If you want to combine the two or basically hybrid your earned sick and safe time and PTO, then you would just want to make sure that your PTO policy is at least as generous as what the requirements of earned sick and safe time are. If you want to keep them separate, then you would have that option as well. So it really depends on what the company wants to do and how they want to structure this.
I think Donna is asking the question that we all kind of had. Does being sick from partying all weekend count as a valid reason to call in on Monday?
Well, one of the reasons is that an employee is sick. That's up to the company to decide, how they want to handle that. If you know that this is a situation where, an employee likes to party a lot, they may have other performance issues that go hand in hand with this, or attendance issues. So those are things that you're going to want to also take a look at as well. I would say if this is a one-off situation and you know that they happen to be at a concert or a ball game or something like that where they were partying, you probably have to qualify it as earned sick and safe time since, it's a one-off situation and they were just sick. But if there's other situations going on in the background, you want to take a look at the whole picture of that too.
I think we're winding down on a lot of our questions here.
All right.
So again, we will make these slides available to everyone who is on the webinar, who registered. And if you have any questions, Ashley has her email up there, Allison as well. And if you forget these email addresses, you always have mine or Elisa's ready, I'm sure, in your inbox. You can just ask us and we will connect you with anyone at Pro Resources that you need to speak with. Thank you so much, Ashley, for all of your knowledge. It's greatly appreciated. So many questions answered. And we look forward to our next webinar with you.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thank you for having me, and thanks for inviting me back. It's always a great time talking with everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Have a safe week.